This transmission is all about Dak Ralter, the rebel pilot. We're going to talk about his full canon story as well as his Legends one, and the very unique way that for this character specifically, the two interact. We all remember Dak Ralter as Luke's gunner during the Battle of Hoth, who famously said,
"Right now I feel like I can take on the whole Empire myself,"
before he and Luke took off on a modified cargo hauler to do battle against a far stronger foe. But do you know where Dak came from? He was all but born into the rebellion. Born on Kalist Six, a barren and unforgiving rocky planet in the deep core that was home to an Imperial penal colony. Dak's parents were political prisoners for speaking out against the Empire and their oppressive policies. They resisted the Empire's attempts to exploit their home world of Alderaan. Alderaan was known for standing for peace, freedom, and democracy. Their leaders, like Bail Organa and his adoptive daughter, Leia Organa, championed these ideals on behalf of the people. Dak never got to see Alderaan. He was born in the penal colony and wanted to join the fight against the Empire for all of the injustices his parents originally argued against, as well as this personal injustice to his family. His resolve must have been strengthened tenfold when the Empire destroyed the entire peace-loving world he should have been raised on. Despite his tragic origins and rough upbringing, there was always a spark of hope in him. It's no surprise that Dak wasn't the only prisoner who wanted to fight back against their oppressors. Dak led a small group in stealing Imperial equipment. They grabbed weapons and tools from the Imperial stockpiles and used them to fight the guards and take down the larger security measures. Their ultimate exit strategy was in hijacking an Imperial ship. Now, some accounts call it a transport, while others specify it to be a prisoner barge. Dak's first and only goal after his escape was in finding an operative of the Rebel Alliance and joining the cause. The enthusiasm he kept in the darkest of times intensified as he joined up with the rebels and finally felt like he could make a difference in the galaxy. He knew they were the underdog. He knew he'd be facing near impossible odds. He didn't care. His optimism and hope are key markers of the Rebel Alliance, and when we meet him on Hoth, it's a stark contrast to the terrible situation the rebellion was truly in. When Dak was assigned to gun for the ace pilot Luke Skywalker, the one who took the fateful shot against the Death Star, he was thrilled. Not too long before their joined flight, Luke was the optimistic newbie. Luke was still optimistic, of course, but he was now much more measured. He was filling the role of the senior pilot, despite having only been in the rebellion a short while. Dak, who represents all of the ideals of the rebellion, saw this exact thing in Luke Skywalker. He saw Luke as the symbol of the rebellion. Dak knew the Rebel Alliance was in a very fragile state. They were undermanned, underarmed, outgunned, and his mission was desperate. His mission wasn't even to win a battle. It was to delay the enemy so that others could escape. Dak's bright outward demeanor was covering up the insecurities he really felt. It wasn't the near impossible odds. It was the high stakes of the upcoming battle and his lack of experience. He stuffed those feelings and focused on the task at hand. During the battle, the modified airspeeders that were never meant for combat were hopelessly outgunned. The Imperials sent massive walking fortresses with armor strong enough to repel any weapon the rebels had. After an unsuccessful strafing run, as Luke was piloting their ship away from combat, an Imperial walker shot the back of their speeder. Dak's seat was behind the pilot and facing behind. The walker's shot killed him instantly. Dak's tragic death was a reminder to everyone the stakes of the battle and what the Alliance was up against. Sadly, Dak's story is not unique in the fight against tyranny. Many brave souls put fear aside to take on a more powerful foe in the name of doing what was right for the galaxy. Dak's story, origins, optimism, and sudden end are a great example of the human cost of the war against the Empire. The Legends version of Dak's story is almost the same in all the broad terms. His parents speaking out against the Empire, their unjust imprisonment, and Dak being born into that prison all line up. There are some added details of his upbringing where he was told stories of the galaxy before the Empire. More details are filled in the legend as well. When Dak was 17, a man called Berg was imprisoned with Dak and his family. Berg wasn't much older than Dak at the time, but his life was wildly different. Berg was a starfighter pilot in the Alliance to restore the Republic. He was captured in Imperial territory where he was flying a reconnaissance mission. Thinking quickly, Berg destroyed anything that would identify him as a member of the Rebel Alliance. If the Empire knew who he really was, imprisonment likely would have been the least of his concerns. Berg stoked the existing embers of rebellion inside the penal colony. Dak, at a very impressionable age, wanted to be all in. The same plan of hijacking a ship to escape plays out in Legends missions, with an Imperial prison barge being specified as the ship in question. To do this, they had a system of barriers to get past, shut down, or work around. They stole uniforms and made it to the landing platform. After faking an emergency and strategically cutting power to sections of the base, they had access to the ship they needed. A stormtrooper, and a true believer in his duty, stormed the ship alone and tried to stop the two escapees. Dak shot and killed the trooper, but not before that trooper mortally wounded Breg. Breg was unable to fly the ship, and Dak, who lived his entire life doing manual labor as a prisoner, was clueless at how to do so. Breg was able to talk Dak through what to do, giving him his first taste of piloting a starship. Dak did a decent job under Breg's instruction. They jumped to Tirfon, where the rebellion had a base. This base, and I believe the entire planet, only exist in Legends, with no canon reference or parallel. Breg died as the two escapees reached the Rebel base. To honor the man who had changed his life, Dak signed up for the Rebel Alliance's Navy. He was sent off for training with the Tirfon Yellow Aces. After receiving adequate training, neither time nor personnel were plentiful for the rebellion, he went right from sparse training to participating in some incredibly dangerous missions. He escorted Rebel convoys through Imperial space, recovered Alliance resources, and destroyed Imperial installations while liberating entire planets. He was only part of the rebellion for a couple years when the Rebels moved to Hoth, where Legends and Canon merge into one story. Dak was assigned to the newly formed Rogue Flight, under the command of Luke Skywalker himself. Technically, Dak was replacing the late Biggs Darklighter. I do find it a little bit strange that neither the canon or legend story tell what happened to Dak's parents. I assume they died before his escape, otherwise he probably would have done everything he could to take them with him. I'm going to go on a quick but very interesting tangent that involves the prison colony that Dak was born into. There's a legend story that takes place after Palpatine's defeat at Endor. The Empire wasn't dead, but it was falling apart quickly. High-ranking officers vied for the top spot and gave themselves lofty promotions, titles, and assumed importance. One such man was Admiral Blitzer Harsk. After hearing about the loss at Endor, Harsk gathered a task force and headed into the deep core. He took control of a handful of planets around Kalist Six, that was the penal colony, Dak's unfortunate birthplace. He gave himself the title of Lord High Admiral and took control of the troops that followed him directly. He renamed this stolen army Zero Command, and naturally made himself the leader. In Legends, Palpatine also returned in a clone body, but not in the same way that it happens in canon. When Palpatine did come back, Harsk and Zero Command went back into his service. I'll be covering plenty more Legend stories like this. I just wanted to mention it since it ties into Kalist Six and rubs up against Dak's story, even if it doesn't fully cross over. Dak's story is definitely an interesting one, not just in one man who embodied so much of what it meant to be part of the Rebel Alliance. He was a representation of some of the key themes of the Star Wars saga. He was also an interesting case where his Legends and canon story have all the same key ingredients, and the only difference is the Legends version is more fleshed out, and there's a couple things that didn't make their way into canon, at least not yet. Aside from some locations and specific missions not being found in canon, his story can be told as one without worrying about which timeline it falls in.
Hey, Imperial fleet! Get ready to suck some Dak!
Check out this transmission next for more pilots from the Rebel Alliance.